Imagine waking up with frost inside your own eyelashes. No walls, no fire, no blanket waiting for you. Just skin, breath, and a cold that wants you dead. This was not one terrible morning long ago. This was every single morning for thousands of years. Your ancestors lived through real ice ages again and again. Giant sheets of ice buried whole continents under white silence. Cold this brutal could kill a sleeping person in hours, and somehow, impossibly, stubbornly, they survived it all. You are the proof sitting right here today. Every ancestor before you won that frozen war. Every single one of them refused to lose. So how did they actually do it? How did a hairless, warm-blooded African animal survive true ice? That question is stranger and darker than most people realize, because almost nobody understands how close we came to vanishing. Let's stop pretending winter back then was gentle. No cozy campfire, no soft blanket of snow. The worst ice age peaked around 26,000 years ago. Ice sat heavy across Europe, Asia, and North America. The land stretched flat, frozen, and completely wind-blasted open. Trees barely existed in some of these regions. Food disappeared for months at a brutal stretch. Human bodies were never built for this nightmare. We come from warmth, from sun, from Africa's heat. We have no thick fur to trap warmth inside. We carry no seal-like fat layer for insulation. We cannot slow our hearts and sleep through winter. Strip a person naked in real cold right now. They have hours left, not days, not weeks. The body simply shuts down, quietly, permanently, completely. Meanwhile, the animals around them were built for survival. Mammoths carried fur and fat like walking fortresses. Cave bears simply slept the entire winter away. Reindeer just migrated toward somewhere warmer and safer. Humans had none of these built-in advantages whatsoever. On paper, we should have died first, fastest, easiest. Wrong body, wrong place, absolutely the worst possible timing. But we carried something no other animal had. A brain built for planning, hands built for building. That combination turned out to be barely, miraculously enough. There was no single trick that saved humanity. It was a desperate pile of small inventions stacked together. Each one solved a problem that could have killed them. Here is how they actually pulled off the impossible. It all started quietly, dangerously, with fire itself. Nothing else works without fire burning somewhere nearby. Humans had controlled fire for hundreds of thousands of years. By the Ice Age, fire wasn't a luxury anymore. It was survival itself, glowing orange against endless white. Archaeologists digging Ice Age fire pits in Ukraine expected something simple. Instead, they found carefully engineered fireplaces built with real skill. One fire pit burned hotter than 600 degrees Celsius. That's hotter than 1100 degrees on the Fahrenheit scale. When wood ran out across the frozen open plains, people adapted. They burned animal fat and bone as fuel instead. Fire gave heat, cooked meat, hardened tools, extended dangerous darkness. Without fire, none of what follows would matter at all. Then, humans learned something no other animal ever could. They took the warmth living on other animals' bodies and they wrapped that stolen warmth around themselves instead. At first, it was simple, animal skins draped loosely. Here's something wild almost nobody talks about anymore. People were skinning bears for fur 300,000 years ago. We know because of precise cut marks left behind. Cuts placed exactly where you'd slice to pull skin cleanly. Those bear hides became windproof, waterproof winter cloaks somehow. But loose skin leaks heat through every single gap. That's not nearly enough during a true ice age. The real fix arrived around 30,000 years ago. It sounds almost too small to matter, but wasn't. The sewing needle, thin bone or ivory, tiny drilled hole. One respected scientist called it possibly humanity's most important invention. He might genuinely be right about that bold claim. The needle meant fitted clothing suddenly became truly possible.
Sealed seams, layered fabric, sleeves that close tight around wrists. A loose blanket and a fitted coat are worlds apart. The needle is exactly what separated survival from slow death. Early modern humans likely had better fitting clothes than Neanderthals did. That small advantage may have decided who lived, who vanished. They didn't stop with fur either, not even close. Deer hide blocked wind while staying soft and flexible, perfect for mittens, perfect for tightly sealed winter boots. Before stepping into brutal cold, hunters prepared their skin carefully. They rubbed animal fat, called tallow, across faces and necks. It sealed the skin, trapped precious heat, blocked cutting wind. Simple, greasy, slightly disgusting, and completely undeniably effective. Out on bright open snow, another invisible danger waited patiently. Snow blindness, sunlight bouncing violently off endless white ground. The glare alone could blind a careless hunter permanently. So northern hunters carved thin slits into bone or wood. They tied these strange goggles tightly across their eyes. The narrow slits cut glare down to something survivable. The very first sunglasses, carved crudely from ancient bone. Now picture the shelter people imagine when they think caveman. Some dark, damp cave hiding from a howling storm. The real truth is stranger and honestly far more impressive. Many of these people built their own homes entirely. Out on frozen land across Ukraine and Russia, caves barely existed. Wood was rare, wind was constant, shelter had to come from somewhere. So people used the one resource scattered everywhere around them. Mammoth bones, enormous, heavy, abandoned across the frozen plains. At a site called Mezerich, archaeologists found something extraordinary. Round houses built almost entirely from mammoth bones and tusks. Skulls and massive leg bones formed the sturdy foundation. Ribs and curved tusks arched upward to form the frame. Hundreds of bones went into constructing just one single house. These structures were sunk partly into the frozen ground, then packed tightly with hides, moss, and heavy earth. That packing held heat well enough for a whole family. The largest known house is roughly 18,000 years old, built during the absolute coldest stretch of the Ice Age. The site shows signs of repeated use across centuries. People kept returning, rebuilding, surviving winter after brutal winter. This ranks among the oldest architecture humans have ever discovered. People built homes from the bones of giants, and the design held clever secrets you wouldn't expect. Many winter homes featured a doorway dug lower than living space. This created what's called a cold trap at the entrance. Cold air is heavy, so it naturally sank downward there. Warm air rose instead, pooling where the family actually slept. They understood thermal physics thousands of years before anyone wrote it down. They also used snow itself as a building material, which sounds backwards until you actually feel it working. Snow is a remarkably effective natural insulator against extreme cold. Thick snow walls kept shelter interiors near freezing, not colder, even when outside temperatures dropped 30 degrees below zero. Long before anyone perfected the igloo, people already understood this. Being buried under snow felt warmer than standing exposed above it. Location mattered enormously too, more than most people assume. Forest dwellers had real advantages over people stuck in open plains. A cluster of trees blocks an enormous amount of brutal wind.
Walking through forest on a terrible day feels strangely calm compared to standing utterly exposed out in an open field. For small gaps and stubborn drafts, people had a clever fix. They packed moss, mud, and sticky pine sap into cracks, sealing every gap tight against the relentless, probing cold. Staying warm keeps you alive through just one single night, but winter's slower killer is something far more patient. Hunger,
stretching across months with almost nothing left to eat. So people became extraordinarily skilled at saving food ahead of time. When a hunt succeeded, they didn't simply eat and celebrate. They preserved everything, methodically, desperately, because tomorrow was never guaranteed. The cold itself did half the preservation work naturally, freezing meat immediately after a successful, exhausting hunt. They smoked meat over fire, dried strips into tough jerky. They dried fruit, storing it carefully for the coldest months ahead. Food went into pits dug deep into frozen ground. Underground cellars used earth itself to keep contents safely cold. Evidence even suggests they sank mammoth meat into cold ponds, weighted down deliberately like some ancient freezing natural refrigerator. None of this required electricity, batteries, or anything breakable. It couldn't fail during a storm like our freezers sometimes do. And almost nothing from an animal ever went wasted. Every single part got used, stretched, squeezed for calories. Hard to imagine in a world where we discard so much. The hunting itself was organized with real strategic precision. Near a tall limestone cliff in eastern France, hunters worked together, using fire and coordinated teamwork to drive entire herds forward. Wild horses and reindeer pushed into a natural, deadly trap, not once but repeatedly across tens of thousands of years. Same location, same desperate strategy, generation after generation surviving. Kill big, dry the meat, store everything for brutal winter. That single strategy accounts for most of why they lived. Here's something easy for modern people to completely miss. These ancient people always expected winter's brutal arrival. Their entire year revolved around preparing for its return. We're the ones who get caught off guard instead. We assume electricity, heating, and comfort will simply continue uninterrupted. When a bad storm hits us, we're genuinely shocked. They were never shocked, never caught unprepared, never surprised. Preparation consumed a massive portion of their entire year. And critically, they relied heavily on each other for survival. Far more people lived under one roof than we'd tolerate, packed into far less space than modern comfort allows. That crowding wasn't accidental, it was a deliberate survival strategy. Body heat becomes a genuine, powerful heat source when packed tightly. Having a room entirely to yourself wasn't actually lucky back then. It meant you were cold, isolated, and dangerously exposed. It was usually people living alone, especially elders, who died first, during sudden brutal cold snaps with nobody nearby to share warmth. But peaceful cooperation wasn't the whole, complete story either. Life was brutally, relentlessly hard, and resources ran desperately thin. Sometimes humans became genuine threats to other struggling humans nearby. We know, factually, that some ancient people turned toward cannibalism when food grew scarcer than any honest promise ever kept. Ice Age communities sometimes faced impossible, desperate survival choices. The most extreme measures imaginable, chosen only from pure desperation. Fear, grief, and hunger tangled together in ways we can barely imagine. People also brought animals inside for warmth during brutal winters. In medieval Europe and Russia, peasants housed livestock indoors deliberately. Cows and sheep lived on the home's lower floor. Their body heat rose upward, warming the family sleeping above. You essentially lived directly on top of your own furnace. And that furnace happened to be a living, breathing cow. Sometimes cold pushed human bodies toward genuine physical adaptation instead. The Yagan people, near South America's freezing southern tip, adapted remarkably. They lived somewhere brutally cold while wearing almost no clothing. To survive that, their bodies literally ran hotter than ours, generating more internal heat than typical human metabolism usually produces. They also used a deep squatting position while resting outdoors. This tucked arms and legs close, minimizing heat loss dramatically. Their answer to cold wasn't fabric, wasn't fur, wasn't shelter. It was their own body, deliberately turned up impossibly high. And then there's the strangest possibility of them all. Some early humans might have survived winter through actual hibernation. At a Spanish site called the Pit of Bones, evidence emerged. Scientists studied ancient human ancestors from 430,000 years ago. People who lived through brutally cold, icy stretches of time. Their bones tell a genuinely strange, unsettling story somehow. Damage patterns appear in cycles, almost like seasonal clockwork. Growth that repeatedly stops, then strangely starts again later. Signs suggesting these people weren't getting enough sunlight exposure. Teenagers showed strange, interrupted growth patterns across their bones. This matches patterns seen in animals that truly hibernate, where bodies slow dramatically, stop eating properly, begin consuming themselves internally. Researchers suggested people lacking enough fatty food might have adapted drastically, perhaps retreating into caves, slowing their bodies into deep sleep, waiting out winter's worst months in something like hibernation. This theory isn't settled science, and plenty of experts disagree strongly. They argue other explanations better fit that unusual bone damage. We cannot truly hibernate now, whatever the honest truth once was. But the idea remains strange enough that serious scientists still argue. Your ancestors possibly sleeping through winter like bears isn't easily dismissed. For hundreds of thousands of years, reaching spring was never guaranteed. Every single winter functioned as a brutal test you might fail, and failing that test meant death. Simply, permanently, completely. Here's the part that genuinely stops me every time. Within just a few thousand years, something remarkable happened. We went from stacking mammoth bones into makeshift houses to simply tapping a button and instantly feeling warm. The deadliest force our ancestors ever faced, ever feared, ever fought, is now something we casually complain about walking to a car. We defeated winter so completely, we forgot it was ever war. Somewhere inside you, though, that ancient survival instinct still exists. Every time you crave warmth, shelter, closeness, safety, food stored ahead, you're echoing choices your ancestors made under impossible freezing pressure. They didn't survive so you'd simply forget what surviving cost. So maybe the real question isn't how they endured winter. Maybe it's whether we'd still recognize ourselves inside their struggle. If everything modern vanished tonight, would you know what to do? Would the fire, the needle, the mammoth bones save you too? Or have we finally forgotten the very cold that made us?